Welcome back to the Danny Flow podcast, or welcome for the very first time if this is the first time that you're watching my podcast. I'm your boy Danny Flow. You could also call me Danny Philosophy. You could also call me Philosophy. So if you've found this channel, make sure you subscribe. If you've come in regularly, make sure you share this video. So this is the 50th episode of the Danny Flow podcast. I think when I started this podcast, it was kind of all over the place. And then the last few podcast episodes that I recorded were more like interview style podcasts. So this is just me, and what inspired me to upload another podcast is hopefully I've been transparent, and I'm a I'm a Catholic husband and father, kind of in that order. Like, I'd like to think that Catholicism is like the most important part of my life, and then kind of being a husband and father is kind of like that kind of serves that higher purpose, right? So if you're part of the Catholic world, there's like certain names that you're familiar with. So one of the names that you you should be familiar with, if you're not familiar with, is a guy named Fulton Sheen, who has since passed. I think he died in '79. But when I first became Catholic, well, I wouldn't say when I first became Catholic, but when I somewhere along the way, I found out about Fulton Sheen, and there's actually this app with all of his recordings on there. And he was one of his recordings on there. Well, let me backtrack. So there's a certain number you can download the app. It's called like Fulton Sheen, and there are certain audios that are free, and then if you want the rest of them, you have to pay. And so I just ended up paying because it's like a one-time purchase, and then you get all of the audios for free. So I've actually had this app for years, and I've not put it to good use, to be honest. But it's Lent 2022, and during Lent, we kind of are supposed to focus on our spiritual life. We're kind of supposed to prepare to celebrate the commemoration of our Lord's resurrection, Jesus Christ, true God and true man's resurrection, right? So not that long ago, I opened up the app, and one of the episodes is not one of the episodes, but one of the audios is titled Philosophy of Life. And that's what my podcast is supposed to be about. So that's kind of what finally inspired me to upload another episode. And because, Fulton Sheen was making me think, and he was saying that, ultimately there's people whose philosophy of life is that there's a meaning and a purpose to life, and then that other people, there's no meaning or no purpose. And I don't remember what he said verbatim, but like I said, it made me think. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, besides mentioning to like and to subscribe, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, when I first started my podcast, it was kind of like all over the place. But ultimately, what I wanted to do with the podcast when I first started it was to help people think and to make them think, and hopefully make them think about things that they've never thought of before. So what it made me think was like, there's people that think that there's a meaning and purpose to life, and then we can subcategorize that. These are my own thoughts. I'm not like trying to convey what Fulton Sheen was conveying. But obviously, because I'm a Catholic, I'm a monotheist, which means I believe in one God, right? That's what mono means one, and then theist means God, one God, right? So and this is just for reference. I'm not trying to convince you to adopt my philosophy of life. I'm just like sharing my philosophy of life, right? So there's people that think that there's a meaning and purpose to life. And there could be somebody like me who thinks that God, when God created the world, right, they put a meaning and purpose to like everything, including a meaning and purpose to your life. And then your life is about trying to find that and trying to discover it. And some people find it early in life, some people find it, towards the middle of their life. Some people unfortunately find it towards the end of their life. But the point is to find it, and the point is to live it out as best as you can. And then if you're Catholic like me, the ultimate purpose is to like be a saint and be with God forever in heaven with everyone else who makes it. So that is part of the group of people who thinks that there's a meaning and purpose to life. It would be more of an objective meaning and purpose to life, an absolute meaning and purpose to life. Objective meaning that it doesn't matter what other people think it is or it's not. It just is what it is outside of us, outside of what we think. That's why it's objective. Subjective would mean that it comes from us, right? But then, so that's, like I said, that's one part of the people who think that there's a meaning and purpose to life, as I was reflecting, right? But then you could also think that, yes, there's a God that created the world, created the universe, but just because God created the world doesn't mean that he created a specific meaning and purpose for everything in the world. And he might have not created a meaning and purpose for you or for anyone. And there is meaning and purpose to life and to the world and to the universe, but we kind of have to create it on our own. Like it's our job to produce it, to manufacture it, to come up with it. So then that's when we would move from an absolute or an objective meaning and purpose to a subjective one. And that's kind of like the two subcategories of people who think that there is a meaning and purpose to life, as I was, reflecting. So that takes care of that group. And then you have the people that don't think that there's a meaning and purpose to life. But now that I think about it, so someone might not think that God created the universe or earth or the world, whatever. They kind of might think that the world has just always been and the universe has always been. Or they might think that the universe and just everything in the cosmos is divine. There's a fancy word for that, but it escapes me right now. And they also might think, like if they think that the universe itself is divine, that is a form of theism. Like I said, there's a fancy word for it, but it escapes me. They might think that the universe has a specific like meaning and purpose for their life. And so in their mind, they might also think that it's something objective, that it just is what it is, and they have to like spend their life to try and find it. So it's similar to someone who thinks that there's a creator God, except they kind of don't have that portion of it, and they think that the universe itself is divine. And so then they could also think that the universe has always been and will always will be. But then they might think, okay, that doesn't mean that the universe is giving me a purpose or a meaning, and I have to create it or manufacture it myself, right? So if you think about it, there's actually 4 subcategories. There's a meaning and purpose, but then there's like, God created the world and he created a purpose for me. God created the world, didn't create a purpose for me. It's up to me to do it. Or the universe, that has always been, has a specific purpose for me, or it doesn't, and I have to create it. So those are kind of the 4 subcategories under that, if I think about it. And I, again, to be clear, am of the opinion that God created the universe and has a specific purpose. Like part of my purpose is to be a husband and father and to do that well, right? But if we look at the people who don't think that there's any meaning and purpose to life, the first thing that can kind of happen is like they could kind of be depressed and sad and anxious about it. And you might ask yourself, like, well, why? Well, if there isn't any meaning and purpose to life, even some sort of, like, if there's no objective meaning and purpose to life, then you kind of are born for no reason. You live for no reason. Even though there's a lot of beautiful things in life, there is an immense, like a gross, like a gratuitous meaning. It's like over the top, like over the limit, like excessive. There's a gratuitous amount of suffering, and that would be for no reason, and then you die for no reason. And even if you were able to create some sort of subjective meaning within that, it was still all for nothing. And then so someone who is convinced that there isn't any meaning and purpose in life, they might fall into some form of depression, or just sad, or some form of anxiety about it. And ultimately they might be what's called people pronounce it different, but it's referred to as like just nihilism or nihilism, which just means that nothing matters. So that is under the subcategory of there is no meaning and purpose to life. But where the two cross over is, like I said, you could have someone that believes in God but doesn't believe that God created a purpose for people, or they don't believe in God but they believe that the universe is divine, but then also that the divine universe didn't have a specific purpose for them in mind. And so these two groups, they kind of decide to come up with their own subjective meaning, to manufacture, to produce, to create their own meaning within life. Well, somebody who doesn't think that there is meaning and purpose could also think that, okay, just because there's no absolute objective purpose or meaning for humanity as a whole, and then just me as a human being on a personal level, doesn't mean that I can't create my own meaning and purpose. And then so somebody might do that. So that is like kind of like a second group in that category, right? And the final one, the final one is someone who doesn't think that there's meaning and purpose to life, like an objective one, whether it comes from God or it comes from a divine universe, or I guess those are really the only two options that I can come up with, or that I came up with as I reflected. They might think, well, if there's no objective or absolute meaning to life, then I might as well like have fun and get whatever I can out of life. And you could kind of break that further down, because somebody might try to go about it following like a subjective moral code, and they're going to try to have as much fun and get as much out of life, whether that's money, like power, respect, just the different things that are part of our life. They might try to get those things following their own like moral code, and they like don't cross a certain line. And then there's the other person that doesn't have a moral code, and they're going to get it by any means necessary, because if in their mind there's no objective meaning or like purpose, then then it all means nothing. And when they like die, if they never get caught or punished in life for doing whatever it takes to get whatever they want in life, then there's ultimately no like consequences, except for like they might feel some type of way about themselves if they did something that they thought was out of character or out of pocket, as the young people say. So yes, as I reflected on what Fulton Sheen said about how ultimately there's like two groups of people, like two philosophies of life, two outlooks of life, two viewpoints, two attitudes, right? There's meaning and purpose to life. There isn't. There's subcategories. There's people like me who believe in God and believe that God gave me a purpose and that I'm supposed to uh, cooperate with him, figure it out, and then live it out as best as I can. There's people who think, yes, there is a God, but he didn't create a purpose for me. I have to just come up with one on my own. Then there's people that think that uh, the universe is divine and the universe is looking out for them and the universe has a purpose for them. Or people that like the universe isn't divine, it just is there, it's always been there, and I have to create my purpose. Then, under people that don't think there's any meaning and purpose, there's some overlap. You could think that there's no meaning and purpose, but you still have the desire to create your own subjective meaning, your own subjective purpose. Then there's people who, you know, are more nihilistic about it, and say, well, okay, ultimately nothing matters, and that is kind of like soul crushing for them. And then there's people that just will look at that, and I might as well get all I can get out of life out of that. And some people might follow their own moral code on that, and then some people just might do it by any means necessary. So, happy 50th episode to me and to you. Thank you if you've, if this is the very first episode that you're watching. Thank you so much. Like I said, like and subscribe, share it, leave me a review if you're listening to the audio version. And if you've come back again and again to watch some of my episodes, do me a favor and please share it with everyone that you know so that other people can find the podcast, enjoy the podcast. And so my question to you, going back to something I said earlier, is that, my podcast was all over the place when I first started it, but ultimately I kind of wanted to do what Fulton Sheen did to me, was like make me reflect, make me think, right? So what do you think? What is your, I think people are intimidated by the word philosophy, or they think that just everything in philosophy is like boring and nonsensical. But like, if we switch it to the word outlook, viewpoint, attitude, perspective, think about it. Is there objective meaning and purpose? If there is, where did it come from? Did it come from God? Did it come from the universe? Or is there no objective meaning and purpose, and all we have is the subjective, personal meanings and purposes that we can come up with, that we can manufacture? You can let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. There should also be a link to send me a voice message if you want to share your philosophy of life in a voice message. Until then, my dear and beloved Danny Flois, I'm your boy Danny Flo. This is the Danny Flo podcast, the 50th episode. Thank you for sticking with me this long, and I will see you in the next one.